Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined alongside Diana Vilmenay, a shareholder for Polsinelli, a Washington, D.C. based legal firm, and we have an absolute expert in legal franchising on our hands for this interview. We are thrilled to talk all different facets of your current legal duties, ranging from internal structure to both domestic and international growth, company mergers, compliance regulation. I must admit, as I was researching how many duties you have covered in the franchising world, I knew I had to be on my toes with some good stuff because you've got some serious business coming your way.
Well,
So
thank
once
you.
again, of course, thank you for joining us. And I want to start, as far as, just welcoming you into the program, is how did you really get started into this industry? And from the beginning, what is it that really drew you into this field of franchising?
Well, it's funny. I think my story is probably similar to a lot of folks in that didn't really know much about franchising before I started law school. So, how I got into it was my first firm when I was a junior associate. We were in the litigation, I was a litigation associate, and we were all sort of part of the same litigation pool. And I was asked to, by one of our then at the time partners in the franchise group, to assist with a project they needed some junior associate help with, and that was reviewing an international franchise agreement. I had no context or clue what I was doing, but I said yes. I mean, I think that's what most junior associates would do at the time, and I was also just curious to sort of figure out what I was going to be working on. And I think the rest is history after that. I worked on my first sort of review of an international franchise agreement. I think I did a pretty decent job on it. And because they wanted, the partner and his group wanted me to continue working with them. And I found myself really enjoying that work and wanting to do more of that work and less of the traditional commercial litigation work I was doing at the time. And so I transitioned to doing franchise and distribution. And that's how I started.
They didn't give you a localized brand. They just threw you to the wolves with an international FDD document right there. So, that's how you know that you're versing yourself pretty well right off the bat. So that's
Yeah,
very cool.
there's a lot of trial by fire. I remember back in those days, and so I have always, when I think about associates, of my junior associates now, and I always try to be cognizant of that because I remember it just was, it can be pretty overwhelming, and then trying to sort of get your bearings when you get a new assignment, right? You're like, what am I doing here? Like, what is this?
You start
But
realizing I got you there.
yeah, in this particular case, it worked out really well for me.
Sure. And that's
Yeah.
very cool to be able to develop some invaluable insights that I can only imagine have helped you progress even further as your career has moved along. And as far as, you're certainly in a position to help a lot of different franchise brands, whether it be on the franchisor side or on the franchisee side. But at the same time, I can only imagine the different challenges that you have kind of ran into as far as within this industry and maybe some similar common mistakes. But as we look at kind of the modern landscape, and this is the
Mhm.
twist that I wanted to put on this, as far as the bigger things at the end of this year or perhaps the beginning of next year, are there any challenges or are there anything in particular that you really feel like the franchising industry needs to overcome?
I think that we're probably going to continue to see some of the same issues we've seen before. Two of the things that come top of mind is there have been discussions about whether there are going to be any changes to the FTC franchise rule and how that's going to evolve. I think my perspective on that is that the rule works the way it currently is. I'd like to see some improvements to update the FTC franchise rule such that it sort of contemplates sort of how disclosure is done today. And so, for example, I would like to see some updates with respect to delivery methods for the disclosure document, maybe making it a little bit more easier for franchisors to be able to sort of direct franchisees to particular portions of the FDD. I think there are sort of like modern updates that would be helpful. But otherwise, I think it's going to be interesting to see what shakes out with respect to some of the discussions about whether there need to be other sort of more material changes to the rule. For example, there's been a lot of discussion about maybe offering some form of supplemental disclosure, which in my personal view, I don't necessarily think is necessary. And then I think a lot of on the legal side, a lot of the points or legal changes or legal things to watch out for are really tied to business issues. Supply chain is a big deal especially for the product-based franchise systems. How will that impact franchisees' ability to be able to source products and get them in the hands of their customers, whether it's unfinished materials or raw materials that have to be converted to finished product, or even getting finished product in the door to franchisees so they can sell them to customers. That's going to impact, it's a business issue, which may impact the franchise agreements themselves because those agreements have terms that describe compliance and operational issues. So I think those are two things that might have some impact next year.
It's very fun to recognize, especially a lot of different news headlines within the franchising industry. It's easy to kind of recognize these issues just from a base level, but at the same time, I can only imagine the legal complexities that go into a lot of these complicated details. It's a completely different dynamic, and it's just even more challenging for somebody like you to navigate, but it's all the more reason to really bring in a franchising professional from the legal side like yourself. And that's part of the reason that we wanted to interview you, of course. But anyways,
Thank you.
something that I did kind of want to discuss as far as the expertise that you've been able to put together. And I can only imagine for franchising brands, you probably kind of have a front seat to some more common mistakes that might happen, and especially you being as versed as you are in the legal side. What are some of the more common mistakes that you kind of see as a recurring setup within some of the leading different brands throughout the country and throughout the world?
I think a lot of the mistakes I see really are tied to sort of like or my new franchisors and sort of their sort of understanding and planning for the franchise system. For example, it's making sure that they're working with a business consultant and not just the lawyers to make sure they have done sort of their pro formas and the math to make sure that the metrics make sense. For example, that they're charging like the sweet spot. They've hit the sweet spot with respect to the royalty that they're charging franchisees to for the ongoing assistance and ongoing ability to use the franchisor's IP for a particular to operate a particular system. I think there's also on the sort of like the growing up the new franchisor side. It's making sure that they're providing what I would call like sort of like the white glove service to their new franchisees. Because if you're a new franchisor, your first incoming crop of franchisees are the ones you're going to want to provide the most VIP service to, because they're going to be the ones who, if they're happy with you, right, they are going to want to help you sell your franchise. They're going to, when other folks come calling and saying, hey, I want to invest in this franchise, what's been your experience with this franchise or in this system? You want those franchisees to be singing the franchisor's praises. And I think what tends to happen is that, if you're a smaller franchisor, you're emerging, you're new, you may not necessarily have all the support staff in place to really be able to provide sort of like that white glove, red carpet service for your new franchisee. So that's a common mistake, right? It's sort of like, how do we go from 1 unit to 10 units or to 20 units pretty quickly? The way to do that is really think about what kind of support you need to have in place for your new franchisees so that they feel like they are getting, the best kind of help and support to really help them grow their units or and their outlets, and for them to be able to help and in turn sell the franchise when the prospects come knocking asking questions about the particular system.
I can only imagine that's a very gratifying sense when you're able to help so many different brands for those exact content, for that exact reason. And I mean, the multifaceted approach of, recognizing these mistakes, but recognizing that you're really able to pull out a wide range of people in a wide range of different industries. It's
Hmm.
probably pretty gratifying. And I can imagine that's probably one of your more passionate reasons about working with franchises. But I also don't want to put any words in your mouth either, though. So as far as, where your own passions really develop out of this, since you really started working within franchise law, what is it that you really love about working with franchises?
It's exactly what I just described, Justin. You hit the nail on the head. Like I was in a sort of area of the law, commercial litigation, where I was sort of helping to companies fight each other. And this is just not really well suited to my personality. I'm sort of a kumbaya. I want everyone to get together and to work together in harmony so that everyone is happy. That also always comes with some form of compromise. And that's exactly why I love franchising. For me, it was about the idea that I could help either an existing franchisor, and the first example that I provided to you, while they were sort of making their first forays into international, right? They were still growing their brand. They were leaving the US or expanding outside the US to grow the brand internationally. And then for the new domestic franchisors, helping them to grow to launch from operating their own operating their own unit to turning it into a franchise system. It's just really cool work, and folks are usually happy. That's what I like to see. And I just like the idea of helping to grow things as opposed to what I thought at the time was more helping to demolish or helping to maybe
Sure.
that might be a little too strong, but I think you get what I'm trying to
No,
say.
I like it. Yeah. So
Yeah,
people
yeah.
are usually happy. That's a good way of putting it. I mean,
Exactly.
that's an advantageous reason. I think a lot of people have really kind of leaned. I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I mean the appeal for people within a franchise or within a legal background to really pursue the franchising industry. That's something that I can anticipate. That's a pretty gratifying reason for why what you're able to do, what you're able to do. And I mean, continued growth in that sense is a huge asset to a lot of people. And as far as the continued growth that different franchises are looking for, and this is the last question that I've got for you. But as
Mhm.
far as one thing that, from an advice perspective, is there something that you believe that prospective franchisees should know before they join a franchising brand? Or I put it this way: when somebody first starts working for you, what is the piece of advice that you would most like to give them?
Know the system. Understand what you're investing in. It's so important. It's sort of like, and it might, someone might say, well, it's boiled down to read the disclosure document, but it's a little bit more than that. It's really do your diligence and your homework on whether the brand that you're spending your hard-earned dollars or your private equity dollars into investing, that you know what you're getting into. And that's by doing the homework, right? It's talking to existing franchisees. It's making sure you understand the financial statements of the franchisor and you can see whether they're doing well or it looks like they might be struggling and need some help, or it looks like you gotta, maybe there may not be the right business to be investing in at the time. It's really taking the time to do the research beforehand because it's such a huge investment. Most of the franchisees are signing agreements that with 10-year terms off the jump. I know 10 years for us, we're a little older, seems like a drop in the bucket, but when you're operating, you're starting a new business. That's a long time. And so I think it's so critical to just take the extra time to do the work. Don't let anyone else just tell you word of mouth, you got to do this. This is the right opportunity. It has to be right for you. This is the right opportunity. If you're going to be operating the business yourself, or you're going to have a manager who's going to be running it for you on a day to day, you just want to make sure it's the right investment for you, your sensibilities, and your resources. So that's probably the biggest advice I would give.
That is a comprehensive take on all of these facets of franchising. And I mean, that was the main reason that I definitely wanted to reach out to you, is seeing that, how versed you are for all of these professional takes, and how versed you are for, really leading a lot of top franchising brands for what you've been able to put together in your franchising career. And once again, I am joined alongside Diana Vilmenay. She is a shareholder for Polsinelli out in Washington, D.C. We are overjoyed that you were able to join us. We are thrilled to nominate you as one of the nation's top franchise legal players. Thanks again for joining us. We're thrilled to keep watching you from afar, and we're excited to see everything you continue to do for the industry.